Call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 61 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Fisheries and Oceans. This meeting, of course, is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of June 23rd, 2022. Before we proceed, I would like to make a few comments for the benefit of witnesses and members alike. Please wait until I recognise you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. Interpretation for those on Zoom, you have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either Floor, English or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. Please address all comments through the chair. Screenshots or taking photos of your screen is not permitted. The proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website. Finally, a reminder to all that the use of a House-approved headset is mandatory for remote participation in parliamentary proceedings. In accordance with the committee's routine motion concerning connection tests for witnesses, I am informing the committee that all witnesses have completed the required connection tests in advance of the meeting. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted on January 18, 2022, the committee is resuming its study of the ecosystem impacts and the management of pinniped populations. I would like to welcome our first panel of guests representing the Fur Institute of Canada, Seals and Sealing Network. We have Mr. Chazan, Executive Director, and Madame Bourgeois. Thank you, because I'd slaughter that easy being from Newfoundland, Program Manager. Representing the Harbour Grace Shrimp Company, we have Mr. Steiner Engelset. Thank you for taking the time to appear today. You will each have up to 5 minutes for an opening statement, and I will invite Mr. Engelset to begin, please, for 5 minutes or less.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a pleasure for me to be here today. And of course, being able to talk to Mr. Chair here, which is I represented in Harbour Grace, it's wonderful. The saving the seals and in turn saving the fish stocks and helping support humankind is very important to me. The reason I have become very interested in the seals is that they seem to be an exceptionally smart species. Recently, we have seen on video placed in the shrimp trawl cod end of the factory ships that we operate in from Newfoundland into the Arctic. A seal could dive down more than 500 meters, and a fish that was being discarded from the Nordmer Grate, which is a system we have to discard ground fish, and it was waiting for fish to come through, and it would take it and feed on it. Indications that we have seen, and I can't confirm this as the real truth, but it is indicated that seals can stay down for maybe up to 30 minutes due to the oxygen capacity in their blood and body. This is a wonderful natural system that they have developed, because how could any living animal dive down as far as that? A human being could never do anything like it. And it is probably most likely just the seals and the whales that is capable of doing these things. My question, if we could use products created from the seal, complete seal body, we could produce high-value products. And one of those products that is already produced is the seal oil, long chain. Number two, the things that I have been involved with other scientists, also from my home country, Norway, is to hem iron pills that can help regarding people that has the need for iron deficiency. Products of lower value could be food and various other things that can be developed through research and given to countries that need health food options. Of course, clothing has been produced over the years, and there is also, for example, in China, they are very good at producing something out of discards, including intestines. Further research on other potential products could be made so 100% of the seal could be used. The seals need from 1,200 to 1,500 kilo for food to sustain themselves per year. Gray seals might need upwards of 3,000 kilo. That means that there is a lot of food that the ocean has to give them. Based on the number of seals, if they are lacking food, they could end up starving, and in the end, from disease and from other causes due to their bad health. Just 1 second here. They could disappear. Our economy of Atlantic Canada will suffer greatly if the fishing industries end up in trouble, as our economy today is also being supported by what we harvest from our oceans. Therefore, it is of utmost importance that proper research done and true picture is given on how we can save our oceans. We are working with scientists in Norway, Mr. Rune Ulvik, and he has been studying how the hem iron from the seals can be produced in pill form. In the laboratory he's working with, they are also checking on if there is any other heavy metals in the seals that could harm any of the products that could be developed, and how you could get rid of the metals for safe product. Example, as many millions of people around the world, of world population, they do need to take iron for their health. Such iron is being produced chemically, and the side effects are very painful, and people have a hard time to use it. The hem iron, for example, from seals, have proven that it can be taken without any side effects and be very, very effective as it is from nature.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ingerset. We've gone a little bit over time on the opening statement, but I believe all members have a copy, and hopefully anything you didn't get to say will come out in the round of questioning. We have to move on now to representative from the Fur Institute. I don't know if Mr. Chazan or Madam.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Chazan is going to give the opening statement. Okay, when you're ready, sir, for 5 minutes or less.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. My name is Doug Chasson. I'm the Executive Director of the Fur Institute of Canada. The Fur Institute was created by Canada's wildlife ministers in 1983, and we're the national voice for Canada's fur sector. The Institute is also home to the Seals and Sealing Network, a coalition of sealing-related businesses, governments, Indigenous organizations, and harvesters groups from coast to coast to coast. I'm joined by my colleague Romy Vaugeois, who is Program Manager for the network. So I'd like to thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank all the members of the committee for inviting us here to share our perspective on this very important study. This study is important to me professionally, but also personally as someone who grew up in a rural coastal community on the Gulf of St. Lawrence and on the banks of one of Canada's great Atlantic salmon rivers, the Margaree. It's no secret that the Canadian seal harvest is currently in a much reduced state from its heyday. From over 300,000 seals in 2004, in recent years, Canadian sealers have harvested less than 30,000 seals each year. Pressure campaigns and weaponized legislatures influenced by anti-sealing groups have led to Canadian seal products being banned in previously important markets like the USA, Russia, and the European Union. The seal business has changed significantly since international and Canadian offshore vessels plied Canadian ice and seas for sealskins to supply the fashion houses of Europe. The current offering from Canadian seal harvests is diverse and innovative. Omega-3 oil supplements for health and athletic performance, gourmet meat preparations, high-end feed, treats and supplements for pets, and of course the warm, waterproof, visually striking sealskin garments and accessories that we all know and love. This full utilization not only shows respect to the animal, but maximizes values for seal harvesters and seal processors. For the last 3 years, the Fur Institute has led a national and international branding and marketing campaign for Canadian seal products. CanadianSealProducts.com is a one-stop shop for facts on the Canadian seal harvest and an online shop front for products from producers across Canada. Pendant les dernières 40 ans, on a eu beaucoup de discussions sur les populations de phoques qui se répandent. Comme le MPO se dirige vers une gestion écosystémique des pêches, le rôle de la prédation des phoques est de plus en plus important et doit être considéré. On ne peut pas laisser la gestion écosystémique des pêches.
Excuse me, Mr. Chazon, there's no translation taken.
Excuse me, the interpretation isn't working. You can go ahead. Over the last 40 years, there's been a great deal of discussion of the growing seal population as the ministry is working to have an ecosystem management of fishing. The predator role played by seals is increasingly important and must be taken into account. We can't leave the management of this fishing to business as usual due to climate change.
Action to reduce seal populations. DFO's manage everything upwards approach is failing. Managing near apex predator populations upwards has led to increases in natural mortality throughout the food web, impeding the rebuilding of commercial stocks, damaging culturally and economically important species like salmon, and driving at-risk fish populations towards extirpation. The single most effective tool to control seal populations is a successful commercial harvest. The infrastructure in both the concrete sense and in the human sense is there right now, but our window to complete this task is rapidly closing. As experienced sealers age out of the workforce, we run the risk of not being able to rise to the challenge of scaling up our harvest to the levels needed to ensure proper management. What's needed to effect positive change is dedicated leadership at the political and officials level of the federal government. Ministers saying publicly what seals eat helps, but parliamentarians proudly wearing sealskin and instructing the diplomatic corps to reduce barriers to entry for seal products into priority markets helps a lot more. For other sectors, investing a portion of their profits into opening a new market is a prudent investment that can lead to long-term growth. But given the restricted scale of the current seal sector and the significant barriers to entry that we face, developing those markets will require government support. That government investment must be supported by the trade apparatus of the federal government, or it'll be like buying a top-of-the-line fly fishing rod but not tying a fly on the end. Finally, we must continue to bring discussions of sealing and seals outside of quiet corners. Creating an environment where the most significant concerns of fisheries groups, coastal communities, Indigenous peoples, and the sealing sector can be openly discussed will remove the taboo that has developed over recent decades. Last year's SEAL Summit was an important step, but we need comprehensive follow-up from that summit and to commit to another summit being held this year to continue to move forward together. Thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you for that. And we'll now go to our first round of questions. We'll start off with Mr. Small for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to the witnesses for appearing in our very important study here. I'm going to be sharing my time with Mr. Perkins towards the end of my time here. So my question to Mr. Chazon, what's the number one impediment to harvesting the current quota of harp seals and hooded seals, in your opinion?
Thank you very much for the question. The current most significant impediment to harvesting seals is a lack of market access for those products to be sold internationally.
So, in your capacity,
Vous êtes à l'Institut des fourrures du Canada.
tell us, is there a market in the U.S. for fur?
So there certainly is a market in the U.S. for fur. The U.S. is big man on campus when it comes to economic activity. There will always be a market in the U.S. for fur.
So I'm sure some people find that to be a little bit surprising. So if we could get access to that U.S. market, what would it mean to harvesting of the current quotas that we have?
I think that access to the U.S. market for any product is game changing. That, you know, if certainly there's work to be done to sensitize American consumers to seal products, to the benefits of seal products. But we hear from our members that they get contacted on a very regular basis by Americans who come across their website and would like to buy seal products, but then it has to be explained to them that, sorry, we legally cannot send you these products. We encourage you to get in touch with your congressperson or your governor or your senator to try and ensure that Canadian seal products could be available in the U.S.
So, Mr. Chason, which government departments could get involved, and what could they do to help us gain access and maybe make some changes under the Marine Mammal Protection Act to get in there?
Certainly, from where we sit, this would require a whole of government approach. That, you know, just letting this be a DFO problem and continuing to shove it off on DFO, let it sit in the line department, is not a path towards success. We need full engagement from DFO, from Agriculture, Agri-Food Canada, and particularly from Global Affairs Canada and the diplomatic corps and the trade commissioners.
So you mentioned Global Affairs. What's been your experience? Has Global Affairs helped in any way, or have they been more of an impediment to the marketing of our seal products?
I think that there's varying degrees of helpfulness from different levels of Global Affairs would be the simplest way to put it. You know, certainly there are trade commissioners that are very helpful, and certainly the Trade Commissioner Service in certain countries has been a great assistance, but having trade in seal products be considered as a core government priority or a core priority of the trade service and a part of our broader diplomatic engagement is something that we have not seen in recent years.
Okay, let's look at domestically here. Would a HST holiday on seal products or some kind of a tax credit, would that help in us selling more seal products in Canada? Just briefly.
I think it would, but certainly our bigger issue is getting people exposed to the product and taking the taboo out of the product, more so than making the product more affordable.
Okay, thank you. Over to Mr. Perkins. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Perkins. Continue for 1 minute and 50 seconds. You're like Santa Claus today, Mr. Small, with your time.
Mr. Angersata, my question for you is, what happens in the ocean when we commercially fish all of the large amounts of pelagic fish and other species, but do not fish the most prevalent predator in seals?
Then what will happen is that the seals will eventually die, because some of the seals, the harp seals, I think they swim up to 15,000 kilometers a year, because they also go up into the Arctic, near Greenland and down. And to sustain themselves, they need this fuel. So of course, if there is nothing fuel, then they will succumb.
Collapsed 31 years ago. There were about 2.6 million harp seals in Newfoundland and a small number of gray seals in Nova Scotia. Today we have somewhere around 8 million harp seals around Newfoundland and somewhere around 500,000 gray seals. So many gray seals now that I understand they're actually venturing up into Newfoundland. So the department has said as recently as 2021 that they don't eat fish. Now, I know the minister said it was a revelation that they do, but their supposed scientists said they don't eat fish. What's your view? Do they eat fish?
Yes, they absolutely eat fish. And it has been in Nova Scotia, on Scattery Island, there is people that have said they have seen them eating even lobsters. And that would probably be the gray seals. I personally seen the gray seals in Sable Island. They are huge animals. And the thing is that I think what is so important, Mr. Perkins, that we can show the world that we can help saving people's lives. What is we are not destroying the species of seals if we can take part and make sure that there's plenty for it to be a long-term thing so we can help humankind. Otherwise, we will never be able to be accepted internationally.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins. We'll now go to Mr. Morrissey for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Chair. My question is to Mr. Chesson. You referenced, you advocated for another summit this year. What would be the benchmark if there was another summit that would conclude that being a successful summit? What would you be looking for at another summit?
I think, thank you for the question, Mr. Morrissey. I think, honestly, the biggest benchmark for success would be that it shows that the government is making a concerted and comprehensive attempt to help the seal industry and help marine management of the Northwest Atlantic. Having, you've heard from other witnesses about there was a forum in 2002 and there was another forum in 2005 and there was talk of one in 2013 that never happened. We can't let these be one-off conversations. We can't bring everyone together and say, all right, well, we solved it, we're all good. We know there are deeper issues. We know there are more people that could have and should have been in that room. In particular, I will say the fact that the summit did not allow for participation by a significant number of northern participants that were interested in participating, including the governments of Northwest Territories and government of Nunavut, as the two recognized bodies for certification of Canadian seal products into the European Union, were unable to attend. So there certainly is room to improve. Not to say that the first summit wasn't useful. The first summit was incredibly important, but the second one will be more important. The third one will be even more important. I look forward to a day where we don't have to have the seal summit anymore.
Following up on that, Mr. Chair, you took us back 2002, 2013. I made a couple of notes. Why over that period of time are we still here today? What's the single item that governments, and plurally, failed on? What decision did government fail on that we are still here talking today about a situation that is reaching a stage where it is having and will multiply a devastating impact on East Coast ways of life and traditional fisheries that both indigenous people and their commercial fishers depend on. So over that period of time, everybody in here has talked about the same products. I've been listening to everybody come in, oil, use all of the carcass. So what has failed over that period of time?
I will say, Mr. Morrissey, unfortunately, I was not in attendance at the summit in 2002. I was 12 years old at the time, which speaks to part of the problem. I think that really ensuring that access for Canadian seal products to international markets is a core priority of the Trade Service and of Global Affairs Canada, that we cannot divorce.
If I could just, because often, and this committee is studying this issue, obviously, DFO, fisheries. But I agree with you. Fisheries sets the quota. That's its sole mandate, is to manage the stock. It is not an industrial component of government. It's not a marketing. So could you be clear on what steps government, through its array of departments and expertise, should be prioritizing to establish these markets? And then I have a follow-up question, if you can. Sure.
I will say that the disjointed approach of the federal government, where we have a market access secretariat at Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, where the Trade Commissioner Service is living at Global Affairs, where there is now an industrial development section at DFO, without having really any control of the program dollars that were moved from DFO to Agriculture Agri-Food Canada under agri-marketing. That is part of the problem, is that DFO sets quotas and sets total allowable catches, and it lives largely in a vacuum. That this is not a part of the broader conversation around Canadian fish and seafood and Canadian agri-food products writ large.
Then going back, because you referenced as well, obviously the most successful part of is to do a harvest, full utilization of the animal. Does the East Coast fishery have the infrastructure to successfully harvest in the quantities required these animals at sea and get them back to shore in a state that a end user processor can utilize?
That's one area where certainly I'd defer to the expertise of some of your previous witnesses, Eldred Woodford from the Canadian Sealers Association in particular. But looking towards the human resource issue that we are beginning to face in the sealing sector, that we need more professional sealers, and particularly we need more professional sealers in the Gulf of St. Lawrence, where the numbers of professional sealers in Nova Scotia and your home province of PEI and in New Brunswick pale in comparison to what there were 40 years ago.
Thank you, Mr. Morrissey. There's about 12 seconds left, but hardly time to get in a question or an answer. We'll now go to Madam Debienne for 6 minutes or less, please.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you to the witnesses. This has been very interesting and relevant. I'm going to start with Mr. Chasson. You said earlier that it would be important to have a commercial fishery that is respectful of the ecosystem, and we've heard that often. And that being said, I think that this would make this trade more acceptable internationally. By definition, how would you define an ecologically responsible and respectful fishing? I think that respectful fishing would be to have a basis in laws and processes that will show that we are respectful harvesters and that we are capable of supporting a sector where the harvesters and the processors are capable of providing a high-quality product. But with this crisis with regard to the populations, are there any links that can be made or comparisons with other areas? And with Mr. Engeset, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing the name properly. I'm sorry if I've mispronounced your name. I think that you have referred to an important key in the sense that you are also concerned with a situation where the survival of the seals could be threatened. And we talked about the quality of life of the animal and the problems posed by overpopulation, and the fact as well that we can save lives across the planet using these products. And how would you suggest increasing the acceptability of these products across the world? And what would you like the government to do to support and take into account your analysis with regard to the international acceptability and product and market?
Need a translation.
Oh.
Okay, Steiner, you can do you control the translation on your own computer. There is somewhere there that you can hit English, French, or Floor, So you should select the English, so as when Madame Debienne or anyone else is speaking French, you will get it translated into your earpiece.
Oh, I haven't done that here, so would she be able to just quickly ask me shortly what she asked?
I'll ask her. I've got our time stopped, so Madame Debienne, if you could quickly let Mr. Inglesett know the gist of your question, please.
Thank you very much. And I'll try to sum up. And your approach is, in my opinion, something that would be an important key in communicating and making this product more acceptable internationally, in particular in Europe. With regard to seal products, by stressing that the objective is not to eliminate seals, kill them off. It's just to achieve a balance, to have a seal population that will be in balance with the resources available. And I think that your approach is an interesting one. Now, what would you like the government to do or do more of to adopt your way of thinking?
Mr. Chair, it didn't come through. I tried to get it on French there, but it didn't come through.
Président, qu'on lui envoie la question en anglais puis qu'il...
Maybe we could send the question in English and then he could, in writing, and he could answer. I would like to get an answer, but I would like to hear his, even if it's in writing, I would like to hear his reaction. Coming back to Mr. Chiasson, because I think I don't have that much time left. Earlier you were saying that recently, at the recent meeting, the representatives of Northwest Territories and Nunavut were not able to be present. Why not? Well,
From the government of Nunavut. Désolé. Il y avait des représentants.
There were representatives from the government of Nunavut, but not from Northwest Territories, and mainly because it was a matter of scheduling. But the Ministry of Fisheries and Oceans did not provide them with an option for written submissions or participation, and that contributed to them not being present, and there was not enough flexibility for their participation, and there should be ways to ensure that everyone can participate. And obviously, I think that seal fishing is not the seals. You said that in the Gulf region there is a lack of seal hunters and seal harvesters, and has there been any reconciliation with regard to those who are harvesters and those who oppose it? And are there any contacts with regard to commercial fishers, non-Indigenous and Indigenous? And is there a transmission of the knowledge of experienced seal harvesters, and is there any possibility for training to increase the number of seal harvesters? Well, I could say that at the Magdalen Islands we have a lot of seal harvesters, but how can we take their knowledge and knowledge for the harvesters from Newfoundland and provide training to people who might be interested in becoming seal harvesters? For example, in New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island, there are some opportunities and some harvesters in the Maritimes, but it's difficult to have a really complete harvesting.
Madame Debienne, and I will say to Mr. Inglesett that the clerk will send him a copy of the question from Madame Debienne, and he can respond in by email in English, so as we can make that a part of our study as well. So thank you for that. We'll now go to Ms. Barron for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Chair. My question is it Mr. how do you pronounce your last name again? Chesa. Thank you. Mr. Chesa, my first question, my colleague MP Small had asked you about the fur market in the U.S., and I'm wondering if you can give me just a quick Coles Notes version of the types of fur that are in the market that you were talking about in the U.S. between Canada and the U.S. Thank you.
Absolutely. The fur business writ large is a deeply globalized trade. So we see product from Canada that moves into the United States that may move elsewhere. We actually see more product move from the United States into Canada at raw state. But there is still somewhat significant fur manufacturing and fur garment production and sales in the United States. There's also significant participation by Greece, Turkey, China, Hong Kong, South Korea increasingly. There is certainly still an end user market for fur products in the United States. Unfortunately, we are beginning to face more and more of the same types of pressure campaigns against all fur that we've previously seen about only seal products in the United States, seeking to ban the sale of fur products writ large.
Okay, thank you. That's interesting because I was wondering if seal was part of this market that you're discussing currently.
So it isn't and hasn't been since 1972 with the Marine Mammal Protection Act. That the MMPA is fairly bulletproof when it comes to any Canadian seal product moving into the U.S.
So currently there's no market.
Zero.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, there is demand.
Yeah.
But there is no market.
Okay. Thank you very much. You had talked about, and I know my colleague, Madame Debien, had also spoken around your comment around the need for professional sealers. Can you clarify just in a few more details around what we would need to do to see that need filled?
Really, what would be required is work that is beginning, I will say, between DFO and harvesters organizations in the Gulf, but the discussion around harvesting of seals and sea lions in British Columbia, would also require some knowledge transfer from commercial harvesters in Newfoundland, Nizhatamadland, Nunavut, and Northwest Territories. There is the knowledge base out there. We just need to find ways to share that knowledge more completely between different regions.
Thank you. And I'm realizing I'm not speaking through the chair, so through the chair. My next question, so, we are seeing a push right now happening. I won't go further down that rabbit hole, but happening for a large-scale seal harvest to happen today. And I'm just trying to understand a little bit further your perspective on whether we are prepared to do something like this today. And I have follow-up questions to that. Hopefully I have time.
I mean, I think that like any fishery, we can't go from 0 to 60 in 5 seconds or less. This is something that would require development of human capital, development of infrastructure to get from where we're at today to even just to reaching the total allowable catch for harp seals and gray seals. But it is something that the industry is ready for. That if there was a market and there was money coming in the door to sell seal products, then businesses will reorganize themselves.
Thank you. I just want to make sure I get my last question because I forgot to set my timer. But what do we have in place currently the capacity for us to move forward with a sustainable seal harvest and utilizing the entire seal? We've talked about all the benefits of the seal products. Do we currently have in place what we need? And if not, what do we need to put in place? I know you talked to market. Is there anything else?
I mean, I will say that, much like to your last question, is that if there is demand in the market, if there is a profit motive, I'll put it that way, then businesses sealing businesses, fur businesses will reorganize themselves accordingly. That really what we need to do is make sure that it's worth a sealer getting on the boat and heading out onto the ice to go take that seal, that it's worth for a processing plant to process that seal into sealskin oil and meat, and worth it for the folks that sell those three products to do it. That at the end of the day, if we can put money in people's pockets hunting seals, then people will go hunt seals. Not to be blunt about it, but it really isn't as complicated as sometimes we make it out to be.
Thank you, Ms. Barron. We'll now go to Mr. Arnold for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses. Interesting hearing the testimony today regarding the role of DFO. So I looked up quickly what is on DFO's website, and one of the opening lines is, "We support economic growth in the marine and fisheries sectors and innovation in areas such as aquaculture and biotechnology." When you look up the definition of biotechnology, it is the exploitation of biological processes for industrial and other purposes, especially the genetic manipulation of microorganisms for the production of antibiotics, hormones, etc. This, to me, sounds like the work that Mr. Steiner is talking about, and could probably be part of DFO's work in promoting fisheries. Mr. Steiner, would you comment briefly on that, and then possibly Mr. Chasson after that?
I would be very pleased to, because I personally feel that if we are going to succeed with the seals, we can't push the fur industry ahead of it. We have to push and see what the seals can give us that can help humankind, because a lot of people are dying, and there are countries and young people that today are not developing because they are lacking iron. And I can tell you that the iron, the hem iron, and the seal oil that call long chain, you can't get a more healthier product than that. And I think that is, Canada has a resource that can help those problems in the world. And this is what we get attacked on, is we are just taking the fur. And not to say I love the fur that comes from the seals. I have a seal coat personally. But I encourage you that we start to look at all the other products. And don't forget.
Thank you. If I can just get, my time is very limited, so if I can get a brief comment from Mr. Chasson, then I have another question as well.
Thanks, Mr. Arnold. I'll actually get my colleague, Ms. Bourgeois, to speak to this one.
Yeah, my job is actually to help Canadian businesses to promote their products, and there are already so many good products out there. There's heme iron is one. It's a very specific niche market, but there's so many other markets that are covered right now. Like, for example, with the seal oil, like he said, we're currently doing a rheumatoid arthritis research. It's good for the heart. It's good for the joints for both pets and humans. These are two totally different markets. And for the meat, just the restaurants and the pet food and the feed is also like for crabs is also different use that we can do. And the products is already existing. So.
Okay. Thank you. Further for Mr. Chasson, you spoke briefly about management of all species except predators and so on. Could you elaborate a little bit further on what you've seen in your work experience? I know you've worked for different organizations, mostly on the environmental side and dealing with environmental issues. Could you elaborate further on what you see as impacts of managing all species, including humans, except for apex predators in the system?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Arnold. And before joining the Institute, I spent 5 years working for a large international conservation organization focusing on fisheries issues. And the global conversation around ecosystem management of fisheries and whatever that means is certainly an ongoing one, but something that we see very clearly is the need to consider predation within DFO's models, within DFO's population models. We're seeing right now in the Northwest Atlantic a the beginnings of a collapse of primary production. If we're seeing the collapse of primary production and pairing that with significant increases in natural mortality, which we're seeing across a number of species, particularly groundfish, if there's not enough energy going into the system and there's too much of the system going into seals, it is fairly straightforward to see that there will be an impact across the system. And it's not that we need to put seal predation on a pedestal above everything else in the model, but that we need to be honest with ourselves and be honest in the management of our fisheries, and not only in commercial fisheries, but in the management of at-risk species, that these increases in natural mortality that have occurred across a number of populations through the 90s and early 2000s that are largely unexplained right now do have a fairly straightforward explanation. And we need to be very cognizant of additive mortality above that natural mortality if that natural mortality is itself increasing.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds.
Thank you.
We'll now go to Mr. Kellaway for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and it's great to have the witnesses here. And it's been very educational for me to hear all the witness testimony today and previous testimony in relation to SEAL. And there's a lot of themes. There's a lot of themes that have emerged already in terms of lack of market access and why that is, lack of infrastructure and why that is. We talked about, Mr. Chesson, you, through the chair, Mr. Chesson, you talked about the importance of not having one-and-done meetings, and I couldn't agree more with you in terms of this. You know, we've had the Atlantic Task Force on Seals, we've had the summit, we had the minister who did say at a press conference in Newfoundland, surrounded by fishers, that seals eat fish. Now, why did she say that? Let's unpack that. And we can smile and we can snicker and we can have a good time on that. The message was to the fishers, yes, but the message was to the rest of the world. We were asked, she was asked to make that statement. It may be funny for some, but it was very profound for those that were there, and maybe potential markets. So I want to go back to education for a second, because you talked about it. You talked about your efforts, and Ms. Bourgeois, your efforts as well, in terms of educating. It seems to me that part of this is reframing, considerably quickly too, by the way, that we need to do this, but reframing the narrative in terms of the importance of seals. From an ecosystem perspective, yes. That they're eating fish, yes. But also for what they provide. For example, we go back to education. Last year, I attended a seal event here that was put on by Goody Hutchins and Yvonne Jones. And they had different types of product. So I picked up a product. I picked up seal pills. And I was told that this would help with rheumatoid arthritis. And I can tell you that over the past year, I think that the pills that I'm taking are having a really interesting positive impact on it. And the gentleman also told me that I would look younger. That hasn't really worked out all that much. That's in this job, I may be progressively getting older. But I want to both of you. I know, right? But in terms of the impacts that it has, the benefits, we need to reframe this. We need to reframe it nationally, by the way. I would even say regionally, nationally, and internationally. So I'm looking to you to kind of give us some ideas of what you're doing, yes, but how we can work together on reframing that from a national and international perspective, but in particularly to the Americans. Because if we do go offside in one form or another, and I don't think anybody here is saying we need a cull. I don't think anybody's saying that. And I wouldn't want to put words in anyone's mouth here. But we need to be careful. We need to be tactical, and we need to be strategic. Because one false move could impact an entire fishery, or two, or three, or all of it. So how can we work together on the education piece?
Thank you for the question. I think that, like you say, this is really around reframing the conversation. You know, we've had witnesses we've seen witnesses appear at this committee representing, you know, large fisheries organizations that if this study was held 10 years ago would not have accepted the invitation, I'm sure, because there was a time where it was impossible to have these conversations, that the conversation itself was the kind of thing that might get the Americans back up. And certainly as somebody who grew up in a town with plenty of lobster and crab fishermen, and my cousin's a crab fisherman, I don't want to see anything happen that will hurt market access for all Canadian fish and seafood products. But seal is a Canadian seafood product. We need to be a part of broader conversations that involve fish and seafood. And maybe not every conversation are we the focal point of the conversation. And certainly looking towards the Americans, CBSA doesn't stop the gray seals from Sable Island at the border. Those gray seals are swimming into Maine waters. They're swimming into New Hampshire waters, swimming into Massachusetts waters. They are seeing impacts from predation by gray seals that came from Canada. And there absolutely is a large constituency within the U.S. that would look at, wait, why are we blocking the Canadians from doing this? And there's the follow-on impacts in other markets that we see, that we go and speak to other countries halfway around the world, and they say, well, we don't want to put ourselves in a situation where the Americans might take a harder look at what we're doing and accidentally run afoul of what's now a piece of 50-year-old legislation that is not particularly comprehensive, or not particularly nuanced, I should say, in the MMPA. So that's something that we really, it's the unsolvable question, I would say, of the seal industry, is how do we find a way to make the Americans, at the very least, clearly say what it is they take issue with and what it is they don't. The Americans do allow for the killing of seals and sea lions under their Marine Mammal Protection Act. They're doing it right now, funded by the state of Idaho and certain northwestern states, removing sea lions and seals that are predating on salmon and steelhead trout. So how do we talk to the Americans and say, okay, well, you're doing this much, we're going to do this much. This is what we're going to do. We're going to manage our fishery the same way that you're managing your fishery. And for far too long, that's been a third rail of that conversation can never and will never be brought up with the Americans. I think the relationship between Canada and the United States is strong enough that at the very least we can have an honest, high-level conversation. We can't send some director general, no offense to the director generals at DFO, we can't send a director general from DFO to Washington to have this conversation. This conversation needs to be had by the minister, and not only the Minister of Fisheries, but the Minister of Trade and Minister of Foreign Affairs, to be able to impress upon the Americans the reality of what we're facing.
Thank you, Mr. Callaway. We'll now go to Madame Debienne for 2.5 minutes, please, or less.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm going to come back to Mr. Chiasson. We went to the recent event in the Magdalen Islands, and we were impressed by the fact that a bit of hesitation with regard to education and awareness raising. And I think that in Quebec and in Canada, we have to develop the idea that we're exploring the sea and that there should be an interpretation center for the seal harvesting, and and for talking about all this potential that we have here. And I think there have been abuses in the past, but I think we have to have even internal ambassadors for this harvest and this product. Is that something that could be done in Canada? Would you like to see that? Certainly. I'm going to ask Ms. Bourgeois to talk a bit about that type of action. Yes. We have a program with the Food Sufficiency Fund. We've had influence campaigns with seal harvesters, and we've gone into these schools, and we have concentrated mostly on Quebec and Ontario because that's all we could do with our budget. But we We've also dealt with the people in the Gaspé region. I don't know if you're aware of the museum. I think that's already a kind of training, and it's a very promising example, and that could be a model that could be adapted and adopted elsewhere with increased investment, if we can make them, to prove that this is really an interesting topic, and people have to be able to understand what happens and the need for harvesting seals. I think that it's a very vast topic, and I think that we have to make knowledge about the seal harvest accessible to everybody, as many people as possible. Yes, I agree that it's very important, and it's just like ordinary hunting, really. And people in Toronto, Montreal, for example, they're very far from where this type of harvest is occurring, and they're not really aware of it. And I think that there is a work to educate and increase awareness, and maybe we could increase these efforts. Thank you very much.
A little bit over. We'll now go to Ms. Barron for 2.5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Chair. To continue on from my questions before, Mr. Why can I not say your last name? I'm so Chasson. I don't know what's happening there. I'm going to blame that on the Monday morning travel. My question is around, you have rightfully so brought up the importance of having territories and provinces across Canada being involved in the SEAL Summit and in this conversation. And I'm wondering if you could provide your perspective on the importance of having region-specific plans in place on how to best move forward when it comes to pinniped harvesting.
Certainly the issues faced in different regions, even as simply as there's different species involved in different regions, we need to ensure that the management of these species is second to none. We certainly face enough issues on the international reception of our seal harvest. If we were no longer able to say this hunt is sustainable, that would be difficult. And managing bearded seal harvest in Nunavut will be very different than managing sea lion harvest in British Columbia. Very different from managing harp seal harvest on the front in Newfoundland. We need certain national benchmarks for these things, but certainly we need to be able to also ensure that local realities are reflected.
Thank you. You had also mentioned the Americans removing seals and sea lions. Do you have any further information around that? I think we can always learn from our other countries, and so if you can expand on that, that would be great.
Absolutely. So there are a few ongoing projects for removals of seals and sea lions in particular localities in the United States where there are already impediments to salmon and steelhead migration, often around hydro dams. So what they see quite often is you'll get to a point where a lot of fish are holding at the bottom of a hydro dam, and all of a sudden a sea lion shows up, and that sea lion will set up shop in that vicinity for as long as they see fit. So they will then go in and remove seals or sea lions that are within certain areas around, and particularly around hydro dams, but there are other places.
Can I just clarify what you mean by remove?
Lethally remove.
Do they utilize the entire seal?
No.
For all? Okay.
To my understanding, they do not use the seal at all.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Byron. That concludes our first hour. I want to say a big thank you to Mr. Chasson and Madame Bourgeois and Mr. Steiner Ingolset for his participation and their participation here today with the knowledge that they've shared with the committee. And we'll take a very short recess as we change out now to our second hour of testimony by witnesses and questions. Meeting suspended. Wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. Interpretation for those on Zoom, you have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either Floor, English or French. For those in the room, of course, there aren't any of those at this particular time. All comments should be addressed to the chair. Finally, a reminder that the use of a House-approved headset is mandatory for all virtual participants in parliamentary proceedings. I would now like to welcome our witnesses for our second hour. We have Ms. Aju Peter, lawyer, representing the Canadian Centre for Fisheries Innovation, of course, no stranger to me, Mr. Keith Hutchings, Managing Director and former member of the provincial legislature and a minister at times as well. And representing the House of Assembly of Newfoundland and Labrador, we have Craig Purdy, member, of course, as I just said, in the provincial legislature for the district of Bonavista. Thank you for taking the time to appear today. You each have up to 5 minutes for an opening statement. We'll go to Ms. Peter first, please, for 5 minutes or less.
Mr. Chair and members of the committee, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Aju Peter. I was born in Greenland, went to school in Denmark, and have lived in Iqaluit, Nunavut since 1981. My ancestors, the Inuit, are the founding people of the circumpolar Arctic, and we are the sole remaining hunting culture in North America. For more than 5,000 years, sealing has been central to almost every aspect of Inuit life in the Arctic. Inuit hunters still follow the ancient practice of sharing their catch with their families and communities. Because the seal meat is not sold, but shared, the hunters depend on their ability to sell the seal skins so that they can keep feeding their families and communities. But the seal bans in 1983 and 2009 have caused undue hardship and increasing food insecurity in Arctic Canada. With the EU seal ban, Inuit bear the administrative and financial burden of proving that the hunt and product meet EU criteria. The sale of seal products has not been covered from 2009, mainly due to public perception in Europe that all seal products are illegal and immoral. The role that various Canadian governments over decades have played in poorly contesting the growth of the animal rights corporations based largely in the United States has resulted in great hardship throughout Canada, but no more than in the Inuit communities. The Inuit communities have been affected gravely. Food security and high cost of living are both impacted by the EU seal ban. The ban has reduced incomes and reduced local seal meat availability. Everywhere you look in our society, the EU seal ban has had a huge negative impact. As the price for sealskins dropped by 90%, the population of various seal species has exploded in our waters, over 10 million plus in total, and will have a serious impact on the balance of nature in the ecosystem. And overpopulation is not a healthy population. On the contrary, to add insult to injury, the WTO states that this ban is accepted because it protects the morals of European citizens. What they're saying is our legitimate right to live our culture negatively affects the morals of EU citizens. Their colonial mentality is evident in the so-called exemption for products from Inuit, an exemption that exists only if Inuit can prove to them that our products meet their criteria of who is an Inuk, what traditional hunting is, and a bunch of other patronizing rules and regulations. Sadly, it has to be said that for decades, Canada, in its feeble attempts to deal with the sealing issue, has failed to recognize the unique identity of the Inuit community and how the EU bans impacted negatively on the Inuit to a far greater degree than in other Canadian communities. I applaud the fact that the government is tackling the issue of ocean ecosystem management, as it is urgently needed for all our sakes. But I would applaud much louder if the government of Canada would actively and forcefully tackle the stigma placed on the Inuit by the EU and the WTO with the bans they have put in place and how their rules and regulations are demeaning to our communities. The dignity of the Inuit demands that the government of Canada seriously focus to end these bans that defame the Inuit communities, and for that matter, other Canadian communities. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you. That was perfect timing.
The 5-minute mark.
Yes, dead on. Thank you. We'll now go to Mr. Hutchings for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much. And thank you for the opportunity to present on the study. And I certainly want to recognize the Standing Committee of Fisheries and Oceans and the work you're doing, and look forward to your final report and recommendations. I'm the Managing Director of the Canadian Centre for Fisheries Innovation, which is a separate incorporated entity of Memorial University of Newfoundland and Labrador, with a mandate driven by an industry-led board of directors representing harvesters, processing, and the aquaculture industry. The Centre is a conduit between the fishing industries, academia, science, and research institutions and companies that supports the industry. We're an enabler organization leading applied research, innovation, and technology in the Canadian seafood sector. CCFI responds to R&D needs in the harvesting, processing, and agriculture sectors, developing and leading projects, big and small, and transitioning quickly to meet emerging opportunities or challenges. It demonstrates leadership and equity and diversity, and fosters understanding and a shared approach with Indigenous peoples and their communities. Finally, CCFI supports sustainable fisheries and enables industry adaptation to climate change. Your study of the ecosystem impacts and the management of pinniped populations is needed more than ever in light of the growing abundance of pinnipeds, especially harp, grey, and harbour seals. I would suggest the understanding of the correlation, cause, and effect relationships between the pinniped predation on various fishery species and the effect on commercially harvested species and other species in decline is gravely lacking in science and thus in the public discourse. From a Canadian perspective, I think we need to ask, are we willing to take on the investment and commitment to truly collect the data needed, research and science to achieve the understanding required to allow resource management reflective of those findings? We are facing an unprecedented ecosystem predation issue related to the overpopulation and the amount of fish being consumed and the effect on the ecosystem. I think your motion speaks well to the topics that need attention. Ecosystem impacts of pinniped overpopulation. We need multi-year, multi-species, spatial and migratory research. Short-term ad hoc stomach content research is not adequate. So many variables are not being considered, such as migratory patterns, change in water temp, and even effect on predated fish species and other species that are available for predation. Domestic and international marketing potential. As an example, Canada consumes very little seal as a food source, but we try to convince the world to continue or to begin that consumption. We need to invest in research in meat preparation and diet and nutritional value of meat and other attributes, expansion as a food source in international markets, and look, as we have said, at full utilization in any harvest. We need active management, a real-time management with long-term supported research coordinated with industry science and supportive organizations that have no stake or bias other than to facilitate research, data, and communication findings for use in resource management. Socially acceptable. We need to view this industry a little differently now. You know, the medical and pharmaceutical attributes of seal, natural ingredients. The new generation views keys to healthy lifestyle from natural occurrences of nature, which fits perfectly with a renewed view of the attributes of this industry. I'd also quickly reference the Atlantic Seal Task Force report, how that talked about many of the similar aspects related to seal diet, distribution and migration patterns, and better understanding of that relationship between seals and commercial fish stocks, and how we need to work collaboratively, all of us, and with seeking out other science from other nations as well. There was 4 relevant points that were identified that are quite relevant: seal diet, distribution, relationships I've talked about, and work collaboratively with all industry partners. I would conclude by stating everyone must be engaged in the research process going forward, supported by Fisheries and Oceans Canada, and used to make resource management decisions reflective of the significant predation occurring in the overall ecosystem and how it is linked. We need to rethink how we collect data and science to support the work of DFO, and we certainly collectively need a commitment to act. I certainly thank you for the opportunity to present to you today, give some thoughts to your committee, and I certainly look forward to any questions you may have as we move forward. Thank you, Chair, very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hutchings. We'll now go to Mr. Purdy for 5 minutes or less, please. You're on mute.
A rookie mistake. My apologies. Thank you for the opportunity, Chairman McDonald, and the committee for the opportunity to address you today. And it was good to see you, Mr. Chair, in the House of Assembly the week before last. Today, I would like to make 3 points. First, let me begin where I must by discussing the issue of jurisdiction. Newfoundland and Labrador for centuries had one of the most important fisheries in the world. Evidence was provided by Sir Albert J. Walsh's report of the Newfoundland Fisheries Development Committee in 1953, a joint study between the Government of Canada and then Government of Newfoundland. A line was drawn in the sand prior to our entry into Confederation that placed jurisdiction for fisheries and oceans with the federal government, rather than provincial governments. No exception was made for our province with respect to the vast ocean territory and fisheries that we as a country brought with us into Canada. No other province in Canada lacks jurisdiction over its most important resource industry. In the mid-80s, the Government of Canada chose to make a partial exception for our province by agreeing to the Atlantic Accord, treating subsea oil and gas resources around Newfoundland and Labrador differently, allowing our province and Ottawa to manage the resources jointly under the Canada, Newfoundland and Labrador Offshore Petroleum Board. We have long called for a similar arrangement with respect to fisheries management, giving our province a seat at the decision-making table and a direct say in the running of our most important industry. For years, we have been told that it cannot be done, but of course it can be done, as the Atlantic Accord proved, and you are the ones in a position to facilitate it. So I urge you to recommend that joint fisheries management for Newfoundland and Labrador become a priority. We have no illusions that it would be a panacea for the challenges we face. Indeed, it would bring new challenges. Regardless, it would be far better to be at the table making decisions than to be making presentations to those who hold all the power. Second, regarding pinnipeds, forgive me if I just call these predators seals, as most people do. Seal predation is an issue for many fishing jurisdictions around the world, including our own. How great is the problem? It depends on who you ask. If you ask the fish harvesters and seal harvesters who have witnessed a large number of seals around our coast and up into our rivers, and have seen the contents of their stomachs or the partially eaten carcasses of fish, seal predation is an enormous problem. If you ask fishery scientists, you might or might not get the same answer. Why is that? Well, the vast wild ocean is not a controlled laboratory environment. Harvesters are of one voice when they tell us that there are still too many seals consuming too many fish and altering the ecosystem. The level of predation is making any prospect of fish stock rebuilding impossible. There must be a program for removals. Anything less is an abdication of responsibility. The last thing I'd like to address is closely related to the first two, and that's the issue of the severe overpopulation of seals. Whether it's harp seals off the northeast coast, gray seals in the Gulf of St. Lawrence, or the numerous other species of pinnipeds that populate our open water, our coastlines, and yes, our rivers. If nothing is done to reduce the overpopulation, we can say goodbye to ever rebuilding our cod stocks, maintaining a balance of our pelagic species like capelin, herring, and mackerel. Predation of salmon by seals of various species in the estuaries and rivers throughout the East Coast on Atlantic salmon is an equally critical issue and likely an important issue along the coast of British Columbia as well. Glenn Blackwood, the co-chair of the most recent report of the Atlantic Seal Science Task Team, reported at the Federal Seal Summit in St. John's on November the 8th and 9th, of which, Mr. Chair, you attended. It estimated that the total harp seal consumption in 2J 3KL, stretching from Labrador down to the Avalon Peninsula, during 2014 was estimated to be approximately 3.2 million metric ton. That same year, all commercial landings in Newfoundland and Labrador totaled 265,000 metric tons, 12 times more than our commercial fishery valued at 1.3 billion. Mr. Blackwood says the science on seal diets is woefully inadequate in responding to a question. Ed Martin, an attendee at the SEAL Summit, asked the chair of the SEAL Task Team, Glenn Blackwood, seals are having a devastating effect on our ecosystem. Isn't the harvest of seals essential and no longer a consideration? The chair's answer was, agree. The Department of Fisheries and Oceans prides itself on two primary strategies for fisheries management: the precautionary approach and the ecosystem approach. We are in the position we are in right now with regard to seals because DFO ignored those two approaches for responsible fisheries management. That is their very own policy and now their very own failure. The bottom line on seals when it comes to the jurisdictional boundary is this: as long as there is nothing done to bring the seal population back into balance, the minister and the department are using only the hope and prayer approach. Since 1949, the responsibility has rested squarely on the desk of the federal government. The absence of action is an action in itself. The absence of action is an abdication of the federal government's duty. Removing seals from the ecosystem must be done. You can count all the seals you want, but counting does not remove them. I look forward to doing my best to answer questions you may have, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Purdy, and we'll get right to those questions right now. We'll go to Mr. Small for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for joining us in the second half here. 25 years ago, Canada was the top fish and seafood producer in the world. Now we rank number 8. Goal under the blue economy is to double our seafood production and to get up to the number 3 producer in the world by 2040. Only 50% of the seafood produced in the world is wild sourced. I'd like to ask Mr. Hutchings, is it possible for us to achieve any of the goals under the blue economy and grow our wild production with the pen and pit predation that we have right now?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for your question. I think within the context of what you're describing, no, if the continual pattern carries on, we have an ecosystem, we have tremendous predation. We need to isolate that predation and talk about how we relieve some of that pressure on both species we're harvesting today and species we want to harvest in the future.
So your organization is involved in product development and whatnot. Do you think we've got a slate of products now available if it were marketed to the world properly? Do we have a slate of markets now? A slate of products ready to go right now so that we can undertake full utilization and bring the seal population down to where it needs to be?
I think there's many entrepreneurs out there and businesses that have done tremendous work, have invested in their own research to develop those projects. I think there's a lot more needs to be done. If we're looking at full utilization of a seal and how we market that and uniqueness maybe of the meat content or other attributes, there's a lot of work to be done. And as I think one of the previous presenters talked about, going from 0 to 60 immediately has its challenges. That's where the investment needs to be.
Thank you, Mr. Hutchings. Your thoughts on that, Mr. Party?
Yep. I totally concur with Mr. Hutchings. I think the data speaks for itself, MP Small. When we look at 2J, 3KL, and know that there's 3.2 million metric tons of fish consumed by the seals, when we harvest around 250,000 metric tons, 12 times more, then if you really want to double our food production by 240, then we're really going to have to look at who is harvesting and taking the fish and the resources out of our waters and our ecosystems. And I would think that the previous seal task team would have stated that it's clearly predation that's taking the vast product out of our system. And I say that in Newfoundland and Labrador, where we have a significant number, a percentage of our homes that would be in food insecure homes as we talk today.
So, Mr. Party, from your perspective, as a member of the House of Assembly, how do you think that the policies of the provincial government in terms of no new tanneries? There's one tannery in Newfoundland and Labrador. Processors can't ship out untanned skins. Do you think that that's right? Do you think we're not increasing opportunity if we can't let some sort of capitalism take place in Newfoundland and Labrador? Do you know of any circumstance this past winter whereby harvesters and potential processors tried to open maybe a new processing facility and they were basically stonewalled?
MP Small, we certainly need to look into that and do our part in making sure that we fully utilize and create an industry where we can take the seals and utilize them. One of your previous speakers in the first hour had mentioned that if we create the industry and we create the markets for this product, you're going to find that industry will be jumping on board in order to harvest and to get involved within the sealing industry. So that is something provincially, and we've got a lot of work to do provincially, but I would think that there's been a malaise other than studies that we've seen over the last number of decades, there's been a malaise in the sealing predation issue. And we've seen to be going from one study to another. All the time, we see the growth in our sealing population, whether it be the gray seals or the harp seals.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, do I have any time left?
40 seconds if you're quick.
Okay. To Ms. Peters, the federal government's response to the decline in Inuit markets in the EU, how does that fit with reconciliation for Inuit peoples?
The reconciliation is reconciliation. You actually have to have action. And we need to see a lot more action from the federal department, who is the only body that can speak on this issue, because as a territory, we don't have the power. We would like to keep the dialogue open as part of the reconciling what has been for. And I concur with the predation, and I concur with taking of the overpopulation of the seals. So in my opinion, if we could give, let's say, 1 million seals to be shared among the 26 Inuit communities, where you take in the seals and then develop them for a market, that could be part of the reinstituting, re-giving some of the money that was already lost.
Thank you, Ms. Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Small. You're going a good bit over, but I'll pick that up on you somewhere along the way. We'll now go to Mr. Hanley for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you very much for all the witnesses, and I want to continue on the same line of questioning to Ms. Peter. Ms. Peter, I'm a fellow Northerner, although from the western side of the Arctic, from Yukon Territory. I'm really interested in the relationship that you point out between overseas markets, particularly the EU, and local food security. And I think this is really important to flesh out and identify and document. But I wonder if you could clarify, given that you talked about hunting seals as being a major part of Inuit lifestyle for thousands of years, can you clarify the relationship between market access to EU and the effect on local harvesting and distribution of seals in Inuit Nunavut?
Mr. Hanley, thank you for that question. Since we started traveling to Europe first, to Holland in 2007, we already knew as sealers that it was not just about Inuit sealing, it wasn't just about Atlantic sealing, it was the image that was being showcased. That was the image that was being shown on television and ads to create money and funds for the organizations. That image crushed our economy. People couldn't tell in Europe whether a seal was hunted from other places or whether it was hunted by Inuit. Our approach has always been that in Canada, we have to be united. We have to have one phase where we say, whether the seal is caught here or there, we are all sealers. And the bad taste and image affects us all, which is what happened and is still going on to this day. Our Inuit hunters and Inuit communities depend on all the work that was being done by commercial sealers. We are one family.
I noted also you talk about you were applauding the idea of ecosystem management of the ocean, but you also noted, of course, the exploding population of seals in the north. Can you elaborate on this? How much is based on local science, local observation, and is Inuit traditional knowledge contributing to that assessment of the exploding seal population? And furthermore, is the TK aspect being recognized enough? Is Inuit on-the-ground assessment being incorporated into Canada's assessment of seal populations?
To answer your last question first, I don't know what TK assessment is.
Traditional knowledge as part of assessing seal, assuming that is part of your assessment of seal overpopulation.
I understand that under the Nunavut Land Claims Agreement, the federal minister has to take into consideration the knowledge and input from the communities in assessing anything to do with oceans and waters and management of seals, for instance. That I'm not part of that because I'm not employed and I'm not part of the hunters and trappers organizations who would give their input. What I do know is the traditional Inuit saying is an overpopulation is not a healthy population. When the animal rights groups went out to save the seals, they thought that if we didn't kill or harvest the seals, that is a good thing. But as we are seeing now in 2023, we have an overpopulation, and we know that is not good for us. Over the years, since 1981, when we go sailing down Frobisher Bay, it's a 250-kilometer long bay. We used to be able to see maybe harp seals here and there, a herd, very minor. Today, the minute you go out the bay and try to sail over, you have herds and pods all over the place of harp seals. And as we have heard, the ring seals that we depend on for our food are intimidated because the ring seals travel singularly and the herd of harp seals are vicious. So it makes it even harder for us to harvest our food.
Thank you. I have a little bit of time, I think. Okay, great. 40 seconds for Mr. Hutchings. One of your recommendations involved we need to be much better at data collection. I wonder if you could be a little bit more specific in how or what kinds of data we need that we don't currently have and how we should approach that.
Thank you very much. I guess one of the issues that we've heard from industry and continue to hear is the actual, time period and collection of data. Example would be, the extraction of stomach for evaluation of stomach content in terms of, what the predation habits are of a particular seal, whether that's harp or gray seal. Oftentimes now that's done between January and April. So it's a restricted period at a point in time in a migratory pattern or a location or an interaction between a predator and a species. So there's no long-term evaluation, say, on an annual basis. I mean, a harp seal will migrate north. So what's it eating off the front? What's it eating in the Arctic? And what's that full diet and predation description look like over an annual period? And that type of work comparatively over multiple years is not being completed. And that's what I guess I'm referring to.
Thank you, Mr. Henley. We'll now go to Madame Debienne for 6 minutes or less, please.
Monsieur le Président, merci.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you to our witnesses. Always very interesting. And in Quebec, there's already a market. There's more people who want to use seal products than are available, and there's the Metro supermarket chain that wants to have seal meat in its stores. So there's a very real desire for this. Mr. Hutching, what do you think? Can you help with this increase in demand in Quebec?
I think you've isolated an item there in terms of, and I think we saw some of this in the SEAL Summit in regards to bringing groups together in the various dialogues and what was discussed in terms of some regions of the country. There may be a market and availability for product, but maybe it's not known, and maybe the ability to get it to that market is not known. So I think that's where we talked about collaboration and integration of what's happening with the industry. We do, through our center here, we do product development, all types of product development that industry drives or R&D drives. But those are areas we can enhance if there's different types of product, or we do a discovery of what type of product the market will take. But to your point, I think we need an integration of that knowledge of what you talked about.
Est-ce qu'à ce moment-là, comme on n'a qu'un seul...
In that case, since we only have one processor in Quebec for these seal products, would you have any recommendations? Can you make recommendations? Do you have that power to make recommendations to the department in order to share information? And I was wondering if we could have a kind of, you could organize, there could be some kind of a table for sharing ideas and information. Would your organization be able to initiate this kind of effort? Is that within your remit?
It's something, yes, we've been looking at in terms of, on a broadly based, as a seafood industry in Canada, and whether it's seals or some other species or some other technology, there seems often to be separation in terms of that information and knowledge. But CCFI could certainly work with you and others in industry to try and bring a national perspective to some of the items we talked about in regards to the knowledge and what's available with marketing with the seal industry, certainly domestically and internationally, something we certainly could get involved with.
Very interesting. And I think that's a very good idea. Ms. I've forgotten her name. Ms. Peter. You were talking about seal meat, which was shared by your community, by the Indigenous community. And do you think that in your northern people, do they have enough access to this this type of meat? And how, if not, how could that be increased in order to meet their food needs? And I think that, and I know it's very normal for you to eat seal food, and I know that if there's a lack of it, it can cause problems for your diet. Do you think that there could be increased access, efforts to increase access to seal meat for your people?
Mr. Chair, thank you for that question. Absolutely. Need to increase their access to seal in schools, for instance, as part of the school program. Nowhere in the Arctic or nowhere down south I have been able to buy seal skin for my own consumption. If you hold your hand out like this, the amount of seal in your hand equals the amount of 56 pieces of sausage if you were to consume it for iron. The iron deficiency and food insecurity problem would be solved if we were to help the hunters organizations provide funding for the hunters to harvest the seals, to share them in the community. They're already sharing their calves. They share their whale, they share their fish, they share their seal. But if we were, because they're doing it out of their own tradition, they have to. It's a part of giving back to the community. But if the federal government were to help promote healthy living, good nutrition, and lessen the food insecurity that we have in the Arctic, we would totally support that. It's education and retaining and maintaining our traditional knowledge. So, Ms. Despian, thank you so much for this question.
Thank you, Madam Debienne. There's only 5 seconds left in your time, so we certainly won't go to another question. Ms. Barron, for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for keeping us on track with our timing today to make sure that everybody gets a chance to ask these important questions. I really appreciate it. Yeah. Thanks, Chair. And thank you to the witnesses for being here today. Through the Chair to Ms. Peter, I do want to express my appreciation for you being here with us today. I feel very, very grateful to be able to hear from you firsthand, and want to thank you for your work defending human rights and Indigenous people in the Arctic, and also congratulate you. I know that you had received the Order of Canada in 2012, so it's great to have you here and to share your knowledge and experiences. I had the honor of visiting Nunavut with my colleague MP Idlaut, the MP for Nunavut, and I spent time in Iqaluit and Pegnerton and had the opportunity to go out on a boat with MP Idlaut and her family, where we fished Arctic char, and they taught me the names in Inuktitut of the different seals that we came across. It was an incredibly impactful experience. And I wanted to ask if you could expand a little bit more. I know my colleague, MP Hanley, had asked a little bit, but you had spoken about the impacts. I was wondering if you can share a little bit more on the impacts on Nunavut and other Indigenous people of the international campaigns against seal harvesting, and the reasons why, as you worded it, the colonial exemptions and patronizing rules and regulations were far from sufficient.
Mr. Chair, thank you for this. Ms. Perron, thank you for the question. Glad that you were able to go to Nunavut. I wish everybody could come up and share some seal, like the former Governor General. The exemption, I was so against it when it was being talked about, because the Europeans think that they can define who's Inuit and what's traditional and what is sustainable. However, under our Nunavut Land Claim Agreement within Canada, we define who we are and what our tradition is. That patronizing attitude has made it very hard for us, because it becomes administrative, and it becomes we have to come up with the money in order to defend ourselves in court after having to prove that the seal was caught in this particular way. But at the end of the day, as we know, it's up to the European Commission to decide, even after we prove everything, to decide that the seal skin is not hunted properly or in the way that the regulations are stating. The other very negative impact it has had over the time was even for our young men, even for our young women, about sealing and seal hunting. The imagery that was put on television and how bad sealing is sticks with people. It's an image that we are having a really hard time fighting. Rather than going on and on and on about the imagery, what we need to do, and what we've been saying about in the sealing industry, is we need to put the human face on the sealing issue. This is our life. You're impacting us. You're making a harsh life that is harsh, even harsher. It's about education, and then putting our stories out there on our tradition, 5,000-year-old tradition, lost hunting culture, blue economy, and you name it. So we need to, as the other speakers have said, turn the dialogue around to our dialogue, to our Canadian dialogue.
Thank you so much. The bans that we've seen and the exemptions that we've talked about I've been hearing from others around the impacts on livelihoods, the capacity for Inuit to make ends meet. And I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit to the impacts that these bans specific to the market have resulted in to people who relied so heavily on this market prior to these changes.
Mr. Chair, and thank you for that question. As you know, Inuit have the highest rate of unemployment, and we have the highest cost of living, 3 to 7 times that of Southern Canada. And when the seal market crashed from $100 to $10, then the ability of the hunter to provide his free food, nutritious food to the community was catastrophic. It made it that we had to live on less food, and the ability of the hunter to provide for the community has become very harsh. It means that the hunter has to work 5 days a week just in order to be able to afford to buy gas and go out hunting so that he can share his food. We are still practicing sharing of the food. We are still, as non-hunter myself, we are still expecting our hunters to provide for us, which is really unfair. I think we should support the hunters so that they can keep providing this healthy food to the communities and secure food security. It's a tragedy. It's devastating. There's a term for it that I can't think of right now. But we should look at it as a human rights issue right now, that we don't have access, that 7 children out of 10 go to school hungry. In Canada, in this one of the most rich countries in the world, we are accepting this to happen. It's really not acceptable. We have to do our part to secure that people have access to food. Seal.
Thank you, Ms. Barron. We'll now go to Mr. Perkins, anxiously awaiting for a 5-minute spot or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Peters, and thank you, witnesses, for your very interesting testimony. Ms. Peters, Peter, a question. You used a term that in your opening that I found interesting, which was environmental corporations. I look at them with regard to seals more as environmental businesses who have basically raised all of their funds to do the things they do off of seals. I wonder if you could comment a little more on that concept.
Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Perkins, for your question. That is not what I was saying. If I said it, then it was wrong. It was the animal rights groups that I mentioned. And as
sorry, I meant the animal rights group. Sorry.
Yeah. Can you say your question again? Because I would never call them environmental.
Okay, the animal rights groups are really, with regard to seals, are really businesses more than they were anything else. And that's had a devastating impact in a lot of rural communities in Atlantic Canada and in northern Canada. And in particular, if you could comment first on the impact that those businesses raising money on banning the seal hunt has had on your community. And two, if the government actually managed to advocate and get those markets open in the United States and Europe, what would that mean for your community?
Mr. Chair, and thank you for that question. I have maintained that with all the money that was raised by the animal rights groups, animalists as we call them, they need to pay every Inuk of all the money they have made, $1 million to repair what damage has been caused, all the deaths and hunger that Inuit have suffered. We have to aim high, we have to dream high, and that's my dream, that more reparation and giving back should be given to the communities, not just a "we're sorry, we harmed you" kind of attitude that Greenpeace had. the impact on our community is the most severe, as we had mentioned before, because we are still a hunting culture. We're still depending on hunting and sharing the food. And when you can't share the food, then people go hungry and no money is made. The price of the sealskin that fell from 100 to 10, our own government had to compensate that amount of money because they know how important it is for our hunters to keep feeding our communities. So Inuit have borne the cost of this.
Thank you very much. MHA parity, we've heard some say, especially at the SEAL Summit, the minister said more science needs to be done. I think Mr. Hutchings even said that. But when I look back on it, there's been an enormous amount of science done, going back to the 90s, almost every year. Even the World Wildlife Fund in 2006, I think, put out a report saying that the northern cod would not recover on moratoriums alone, and the government had to do something else. There are all kinds of fishery studies on it. I myself put forward an order paper question on seal stomach samples just for the last 5 years and got 122 pages worth of seal stomach samples produced by the Department of Fisheries. So do we really need to have more science done before we act on getting a commercial seal harvest going again?
Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. We certainly do not. That's in our, I think, collective opinion within the House of Assembly here in Newfoundland and Labrador, that we certainly do not need any more studies or any more counts to know that the impact of seals on our rebuilding of our groundfish stock. And the data, I would think, speaks for itself. We have, as you know and well aware, that we've had harvesters that would display for the media to see the contents of the stomachs of the seals. Everyone in Newfoundland and Labrador, but everyone was watching, would indicate how much these predators consumed. You had Bob Hardy, who would be our foremost expert on a panel at one time. I remember him quoting saying that the harp seal population, according to DFO, would consume 1 million metric tons of capelin per year annually. And we know how important, capelin is pelagic to the rebuilding of any stock that we would have. So when we have seals consuming 1 million metric tons, our harvest being 24,000 metric tons, we don't need another study to understand the significance of the predation that we face in our province and in our waters. I just want to end with one. I listened to the broadcast, and the broadcast, Todd O'Brien was in Placentia Bay at a river, and I forget the name of the river, but this was back in September of the past year. And he interviewed a river warden, and he said the salmon in the rivers don't have a chance. And he was telling Todd O'Brien the fact that here they were consuming 200 to 300 seals waiting at the mouth of the river for the smolt to leave. He said they never had a chance to get by. So I think the more we wait from taking action, the more grave that our fishery resource and the rebuilding of it and the situation that we find ourselves in is going to be. And I would say that we're unanimous in our House of Assembly, regardless of party, on that belief. But thank you for the question.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins. We'll now go to Mr. Heath for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Chair, Mr. McDonald. Just in those last comments, it's very interesting. You need a market. We're not fulfilling our quota now on our harvest, so we need a market, and that's where it starts. And but I want to go to Mr. Hutchings. Mr. Hutchings, we're seeing a lot of action on the Canadian side of trying to move the needle on a seal harvest. But what's happening on the U.S. side? Why are we not seeing the fishers on the U.S. side be more attentive to this situation. We're seeing quotas being reduced in mackerel, the herring fishery in the U.S., but we don't seem to be having any information or parity on the seal harvest in the U.S.
Thank you. So exactly, I'm not sure your question. Could you just quantify exactly what it is you want me to answer?
Yes. Why are we not seeing any urgency in the U.S. fishery on the seal harvest?
I'm not sure. I don't really know the answer to that question. I know there's been some, activity off and on. I don't know whether predation is as big a factor it is what we see on the East Coast and in the Gulf. But then you have the Marine Mammal Act, and whether there's a reluctance to pursue that based on some of the challenges that's pushed back there in regard to that. But that's the best I can do in regards to giving some suggestion of why that may be.
The Marine Mammal Protection Act, and I'll give you a situation that just happened in Prince Edward Island in the last 10 days. We have a company that was making bait. They were using a byproduct of seal. And within that first week, they were notified by the U.S. under the Marine Mammal Protection Act that if any of that byproduct was used for lobster bait, lobsters shipped into the U.S., they would stop accepting lobsters shipped into the U.S. by Canada if you were using seal as a byproduct in that bait. So the struggle here, I think everybody around this table is on the same page on wanting to increase the seal harvest, wanting to find new markets and products. But how do we get to the next level with the United States? And is it through the fishers? Is it through additional trade negotiations? I think the Marine Mammal Protection Act was in 1972. It's obviously outdated, but it seems to be bulletproof to some extent. Or are we just dealing with total politics here like we were in the mid-2000s when there was a human rights and when there was possible collateral damage for other seafood exports into the U.S., where we were seeing a call for a ban on Canadian seafood products? So how do we overcome some of this situation? It sounds general. We're all on the same page in Canada. We want to see a seal harvest. We want to see it grow. We want to see new markets created. But we're running into a wall. Is it totally political in the U.S., or what's your opinion on that?
I think it's driven by agendas, but you make an interesting comment when you talk about industry and getting interconnected. And is that a basis to bring together Canadian industry and American industry in regards to the seafood and the fishery? And does that become the advocate and the lobbyist for change? And I think that's a very interesting concept. I don't know what the coordination is of that, and is that something we should be pursuing as a nation, as a country? Obviously, there's political maturations going on and lobbying in regards to the Marine Mammal and Conservation Act, but maybe it's an industry-driven initiative if we're going to have results from that perspective.
And I would agree with you. And I think the most effective sometimes policies that and decisions that are made are usually made sometimes, and sitting here as a government representative, but usually made by private sector and industries. But you still have to overcome the nuance of the human rights, the activists that we've talked about. And it's imperative. And, we can talk about food security and Indigenous rights and reconciliation, but they don't care. And we need to find a way to better explain the processes. And I'm not sure if government to government is that part of that process, and it comes back to the industry again. What would you suggest that we, as policymakers sitting around this table, try to articulate to DFO or the bureaucrats at hand that are responsible for some of these decisions?
I think I mentioned in my opening comments there was a real requirement for a commitment, and that's a national commitment. It's about elected officials that sit around this table. It's about industry. It's about adapting to a new market and a new vision of what a seal hunt is and what the attributes are of that mammal when it's harvested and what the benefits are. I think it's a very holistic approach, but I think that's the direction we need to go in. just one-off industry fighting, politics fighting doesn't work. It's a task at hand, but I think all parties together with a clear vision of what you want, and a national government, whoever that is, that stands and said, this is important to Canada, we're going to pursue it, and we're going to provide the supports to pursue it.
Thank you, Mr. MacDonald. That concludes our questioning for today's meeting. I want to apologise to Madam Debian and Ms. Barron for not getting to their 2.5-minute section in this part of it. We have the end at 1 o'clock. But I would like to remind members to please be cognizant of the time they're using as we go along. Like, if I add up everything that everybody went over, we probably would have had time to get Madame Debian and Ms. Barron to get their questions in as well. So I'll try and be much stricter the next time. And on Thursday, of course, we will continue to hear from witnesses on this very important topic. I want to thank Mr. Purdy, Mr. Hutchings, and Ms. Peter for attending today's session, albeit virtually, and sharing their knowledge with the committee for when they do write their report. So again, thank you, and to everyone, have a good day. Meeting adjourned.